Scouting and evaluating players for the NFL draft is a year-round process. Taking a look at Seattle's latest draft class, we're going to be going behind the scenes from a scouting lens with a key member of the Seahawks personnel department on our latest episode of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. We'll be with him here in a moment. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The NFL draft is officially in the books, and so is rookie minicamp. So it's fitting that we take a chance to look back at how the Seahawks landed their latest draft class by bringing in a very special guest, Matt Berry, the Senior Director of Player Personnel, brand new title for him after being the Director of College Scouting for 8 seasons for the Seahawks. And he's going to be helping us pull back the curtain a little bit and look at how Seattle got their 10-player draft class. Matt, we greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Let's talk first rounders first. Get 2 of them. You get the top 5 pick, highest pick that the Seahawks have had during your time with the organization. And Devon Witherspoon, I've asked Pete and John about this already, but I'm just curious, with a guy like that has not played football very long, junior year is when he started playing, how does that impact the evaluation for a player like Witherspoon, who clearly has top-level instincts at the cornerback position? And had you seen a prospect that was that high on a board or high on your board that checked off that box where they were really instinctive and hadn't played a lot of football?
Well, we were really comfortable, Corbin, with the amount of time he had played. I mean, he started 6 or 7 as a sophomore, and then the last 2 years. So he'd played a bunch, primarily on the outside. The question would be, projecting him inside at nickel. But we were ecstatic about the player, and you really touch on the instincts and the play style and his anticipation. All those things really got us jacked up about the player. I mean, we haven't picked up there in forever, and it was a lot of fun to be able to evaluate those guys, get to know them, spend time with them. The process was unbelievable. The collaboration between coaches and analytics and our scouting staff. I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot different from that standpoint, being able to talk to, your top 5, 10 prospects, in the draft. It was cool.
Very cool. And I also want to have an opportunity just to thank you, Matt, for joining us. And again, kind of just congratulating you on the new title, Director of College Scouting before, and now the Senior Director of Player Personnel. That's actually one of the questions I want to kind of start off with here is for those of our listeners, our viewers, and thank you as always for all of those listeners and viewers. Can you just explain a little bit? I mean, what's the difference in your title? And again, congratulations to you, to Nolan, to Aaron, and to Willie as well.
Yeah, it's really a credit to John, giving everybody an opportunity to grow. I mean, we have the way we do things and the way we operate. In the past, it's been flat, and everybody gets experience in every area. So I've done some pro. I do primarily college. Nolan's done both. Trent's done both. Aaron Heinlein had an opportunity to grow. And really, this was a chance to reward him and Jason Barnes and some other guys for really being stellar in their job for years and years and years. Because we haven't had much turnover, to be frank. So it was really a credit to John and to those guys in the work they put in.
Jaxon Smith-Njigba 2 years ago, over 1,600 receiving yards, had a phenomenal season, even with Garrett Wilson and a couple of the other guys, Chris Olave, that they had there. When you look at his skill set compared to DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, where do you see his skill set making things easier on them? And how does he maximize the ceiling for the passing game with this offense?
Well, I think he just adds another weapon. You look at where he's going to start. It's going to be in the slot. I mean, his ability to create separation now, his feel, his ability to be a quarterback-friendly player, his transition post-catch. It just puts that much more pressure on a secondary and a defense. And when you put that with our tight end group and our running back group in the pass game and DK and Tyler and the way Gino's been playing, I mean, I think it gives Shane a ton of flexibility in the formations and the personnel groupings and the plays he's going to be able to call. So it's really exciting. We haven't had a player in quite some time with a young player, I would say a rookie coming in with his instincts and his ability to separate from the slot. So we're excited about him. Did not think he would be there at 20.
I 100% agree with you. I think terrific player, both Witherspoon and Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Pete Carroll, of course, famously in the post-draft press conference, used a comparison that maybe you had heard of before, comparing Devon Witherspoon to Troy Polamalu. When I've used the comparison myself, you may not agree with this one at all, but Jaxon Smith-Njigba to Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen. Is there any players in this class, whether it be JSN, whether it be Witherspoon, any other players in this class, Matt, that you had a player comp that you felt comfortable with, or maybe there was a player in past years that Seattle selected that you just felt like there was a very clean player comparison that maybe some of our listeners might be able to kind of get a better idea of what type of prospect the Seahawks are getting, whether it be, again, any of these two players or anybody else from Seattle's 2023 draft class?
Yeah, I think player comparisons are always hard. We like to look at these guys as unique individuals. They're all different. They're all coming from different backgrounds, different schemes, and trying to fit in a role. So that there's not really a clean comparison for me to be able to capture with Devon or with Jaxon, because you're always looking for how the player is going to fit what you're asking them to do, and then if the player's makeup fits our culture. And you're so focused on that. I'm not, to say that Jackson's Keenan Allen, well, to me, Keenan Allen was used differently at Cal, and he's a totally different person than Jaxon. He's been through a totally different experience and build up to his college career, or the end of his college career, although he was injured too, coming into the process and didn't run till late. So I think that's always a hard thing to do. I think we just focus on the uniqueness of the talent and the player as a staff, and that's what we really try to dig into. Versus the comparisons can get a little messy and get a little touchy sometimes, because X person has a relationship with this player or a background with a certain player. So we try to keep it clean and focus on each player's uniqueness.
All right, well, let me jump in one last second then to kind of change that question. You talked about how unique of a player that Jaxon and Devon both are, of course. With JSN, to me, one of the things that was truly unique, I was stunned by just how quick he proved himself to be during the combine situation with the 3-cone drill, the short shuttle times. Matt, I'm very much testing your mental Rolodex here. Can you remember a receiver of his size that had that type of change of direction?
No, I mean, you're comparing him change of direction to Doug Baldwin when you're looking at with short shuttle and stuff. I think the cool thing about Jaxon is people had kind of forgotten about him. Everybody was 2021 Ozzy, the same player. He's been hurt all year. Is there something wrong? And he reminded everybody who he was at the combine, and his route running and the way he caught the ball and how smooth he looked operating, how easy a lot of that stuff looked for him. He reminded all of us how talented he was. And then he built on it at the pro day, and he ran when people didn't think he should run. And that just speaks to the type of makeup and the type of competitor and wanting to prove himself and how special a prospect and individual he actually is. So we were jacked up to get him as a group.
I always enjoy John Boyle's article that comes out a few days after the draft, kind of looking inside the draft room. And the thing that jumped out to me this year was the idea that you guys had a first-round grade on Derek Hall, and you were able to get him at pick number 37. And that means there's got to be some elite traits there. What jumps out to you in Derek Hall's game that makes him a first-round caliber player? And how much does the leadership and character play into that grade? Or is that something that varies player to player? Because obviously he's got an incredible story getting to the NFL.
Yeah, Corbin, I kind of want to stay away from why and how we put guys in certain spots on the board. But the simple way to answer it is everything matters. Everything in the process matters. The film, the practice, when you see the players at practice, when you're in the school, the way they handle the All-Star season, the interviews, everything matters. With Derek, what stands out is his get off, his long arm, his ability to convert speed to power, the play style, which is reminiscent of Chenna on the other side, and having two guys play with that type of physicality is something we coveted. and then just the motor and the relentlessness to close in and chase. He's a guy that played 68% of the snaps in 21, and he played 83 and change percent this year, and there was no change in production. This is a player that plays hard, that's consistent, that keeps coming, that's relentless. And then you top it off with the type of person he is, which has been well documented through the draft season, the process, how much adversity he's overcome, how much of a natural, leader, and the maturity and the internal drive that he has. We were really excited to get the player. But again, I mean, it's one of those things where the position value and the person and the skill set all aligned, and we were fortunate to be able to draft him at 37.
This latest episode of Locked On Seahawks is brought to you by FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to points scored and three-pointers drained. I'm a huge fan of player prop parlays, and you can make bets such as Anthony Davis to score 20 points at -210 in the Lakers' opening game against the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. There's no better place to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
No, again, another terrific player with a terrific background. Absolutely, loved his story, as Corbin alluded to a moment ago. I thought that he was a little bit of a surprise for some people. I think that Zach Charbonnet, considering the success that you had a year ago with Ken Walker, the rightful offensive rookie of the year a year ago, I think that selection surprised some people. Matt, I mean, how do you feel that a player like Charbonnet, who's just obviously a very physically different type of a back, just a bigger player, how do you think that he complements Ken Walker III? Is it similar to what you just mentioned a moment ago with Uchenna Nwosu in the way that Derek Hall can complement him off the other side?
Yeah, well, you guys have been around us long enough to know how much coach and as an organization we covet the run game, and there's no secret that those guys get beat up, and you need depth at the position. And if you go back and look over, you can find running backs later, but you find really quality running backs. I mean, we at 53 where we took him, we felt like that was a really good value, and we covet a physical finishing style runner that's attacking downhill. He can catch the ball. He's a 4-down player. He can play on special teams. He's outstanding contact balance. He's shifty. He's got a really unique style about him. And he keeps coming. He keeps attacking teams. I think up in the Northwest, we witnessed that against some of the colleges up here. I mean, he's a really good football player and just as good a person. So we were excited to get him. We're well aware of all the arguments and value of position. And I think you have to look at each class uniquely, right? And you're trying to find players throughout the draft that really impact your program. And we identified him as one that would come in and impact us right away in a positive way.
And I'm sure Charbonnet and Ken Walker are both going to be really excited about the first pick that you guys made in the 4th round, Anthony Bradford. There have been very few guards that have come into the draft process with the athletic profile at 330 plus pounds that this guy has, the 10-yard split, the really good change of direction, testing scores. Where did you see that show up most in his film? And going into the NFL, where do you foresee that athleticism maybe being developed a bit more by Andy Dickerson and the staff?
Yeah, it speaks. I mean, you touched on all that. We're with all these guys, we're really excited to get them with our staff. I mean, that's part of the whole process of identifying the players that fit, and then we'll have the chance to transition quickly and have the most success here. And Andy and the offensive line guys were really instrumental in helping us with Anthony. I mean, we brought him out on a 30 visit and got to spend time with him. Their scheme at LSU is a little bit different than what we do here. They're more gap, inside zone power, and we want to be a mid-zone, outside zone team. So between Andy and his staff, our analytics staff, which really dug into the athletic profile, and then our scouting staff, we really came to good consensus on him as a player. But to answer your question, Corbin, I mean, he's a 2.5% pressure guy. He gave up 12 pressures last year in the SEC, which he's playing a bunch of good players. So I know he comes across as like this run blocking mauler of a dude, and he is powerful, and he's got a ton of athletic, ability. But he really stood out as a pass protector. He can win at the line of scrimmage. He doesn't get pushed, and we felt like he'd be a good candidate to compete with Phil at the right guard spot. We're really excited about him, and feel like the arrow's pointed up. The last 2 years he has been rolling, and he seems like he's a young kid that's just getting started. So we're excited.
And you mentioned just the dominance that is SEC defensive lines, and the fact that Bradford was as successful as he was, despite going against that kind of talent, really does create some excitement here. But one of the SEC defensive linemen who wasn't necessarily known as a pass rusher, but at the same time still certainly has that size, that physicality, is your next selection, 4th round Cam Young, a defensive lineman from Mississippi State. What is it about him that you feel like that he can be, one of the answers to a run defense that, struggled, containing the run a year ago?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he is old school. He's tough. He's long. He's physical. He plays really hard. He's a player that doesn't. I mean, in his mind, he wants to eat up blocks so that Bobby and Devon and Jordan and those guys can make tackles. That's his mentality, and he's not afraid of the dirty work, and that's who he is. And he's an old school, NFL offensive lineman, NFL defensive lineman. He's 319 pounds. He's physical. He's tough. He plays really hard. So all those things stuck out. He's got good block recognition. He fights pressure well. He can play off blocks. He plays down the line of scrimmage. He's a good run player. And now they're a different scheme. They stem and move their fronts all the time. So it's not as clean an evaluation because all you see him going almost every play he's moving. And so that took a lot of time with Clint and his staff and us getting together and finding the clips of him, playing the style we're going to play. And I think that was, again, credit to the collaboration that we had here through this process.
The weight has been a big discussion point with a number of these guys. Cam Young was 304 at the combine,
Yep.
and then Pete Carroll said 320 at rookie minicamp. And Mike Morris, the first 5th round selection, it's really been the number one storyline. I was cracking up listening to Clint Hurt tell him, hey, you don't have to push yourself away from the table anymore because you're going to be playing inside on the defensive line. What is it about his game? Because he was playing on the edge for the most part with Michigan. What stood out from his tape playing for the Wolverines that jumped out to you saying, this guy is a 3-tech, or he is an interior defensive lineman in our scheme? Because obviously there's some projection there when you're talking about a guy that was mostly playing outside as a stand-up outside linebacker for Michigan. Yeah,
good question, Corbin. I mean, we take 21 and 22 as a collective, right? So we do both years. So in 21, he actually played 50% inside. So it's really the versatility of the athlete, the length, the range that his body can go. He can get big, he can get small, he can play anywhere from the 5 to the 4-eye to the 3. And we really like the pass rush metrics inside. I mean, we had him, I think, 4.4% above expected from the 3-tech, which is really exciting for us, in sub situations to have a guy that can play big end and then come in and play, give you pass rush as a 3 technique, to be in that rotation. So we were really excited about him. I mean, I think, he's a big enough controlled athlete to be 290 pounds on the edge, setting the edge in the Michigan defense and being really productive. We felt like that it's a natural progression. And going back to the 21 tape, watching him take on doubles, take on combos, get off blocks, play down the line of scrimmage. He plays, again, another guy with a very good motor, very good effort. We were excited about him, the versatility there.
I had a question as you were kind of explaining a little bit about, Mike Morris. I was going back to his high school days. He, growing up in Florida and then obviously wound up going to University of Michigan. Exact opposite, basically, with Bradford, who grew up in Michigan and then wound up, playing his college ball at LSU. I'm kind of curious about just the maturity of these young men. Is that something that my work with the BC Lions, for example, I know that one of our focuses is we're going to try and look for players that we want some regional loyalty We don't want to invest a couple of years into a player, and then once they get their opportunity in free agency, then they're going to want to go back to the East Coast. They're going to want to go back, wherever the case might be. Is that a area that you guys, the Seahawks, will really start to explore with these players? Are you looking into their regional backgrounds and just viewing them as players like, okay, this is a person who has the mental maturity, to be able to handle moving, again, as you well know, Matt, Seattle is an awful long ways away from a lot of the country. Is that something that you put some stock into, or is that just all, a goofy draft analyst talking out of his somewhere?
Rob, I don't think that's. I think first off, we're unique in that we have Coach Carroll's culture here. Like, so when we get people here, he's all about getting the best out of everybody and creating their best. So that's something that's real here. I mean, we're in year 14 of it. So it's not so much the transition, this guy's from Florida, he's coming to Seattle, we're worried he's going to go to the Dolphins. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. So I'm not worried from that end. But transition from college to our program is huge for us. That's why we talk about smart, tough, and reliable. High-end competitors. That's our language. We talk about it over and over and over again. And I think you've seen in the last couple of years, we've been really disciplined about and you're going to ask about a couple other guys that have a chip on their shoulder, that have something to prove, that are internally motivated, that are high-end competitors, that it shows up everywhere. It shows up in their tape. It shows up in their interviews. It shows up when you call them and how quickly they get back to you. Those are the types of guys we're looking for, so that the transition, so they can come in, going back to my previous point about impacting our program and our roster. You don't have time. You don't have the developmental time with the structure of the NFL anymore to bring these guys along. They have to come in and play, and they have to come in and impact your roster if you want to be a team that can consistently competes for championships, as John says all the time. I mean, that's our focus.
With Oluwatimi, obviously center is a position that has, kind of like defensive line we talked about before. Were you surprised, frankly, to see a guy that is as celebrated as Oluwatimi was? To still be available at that point in the draft, and how comforted are you that you have a center now as a rookie that does have that playing experience, does have that maturity that you just talked about?
Yeah, we're super excited about Olu. We're excited about Zach as well, who we acquired, and that competition with Joey is going to be really exciting to watch, here in camp. But yeah, I mean, you can get into value of position arguments, and Olu is really a center only that you're projecting to be able to play guard. So I think that pushes him down a little bit from a draft standpoint. But we love the player. We love his intelligence, his maturity, how he went from the University of Virginia in a spread scheme and went to Michigan for his grad year in a totally different scheme, pro style, where he's making calls and adjustments, and doing well. How quickly he transitioned. So that was really, really cool. Oh, I'm in Evan Brown, guys. I don't know why I said Zach. The competition between Olu and Evan and Joey. But the fact that he was able to make that transition from a scheme that he played at UVA, where he didn't have to make any calls, to coming in the spring and becoming a captain and running the offensive line, running the call, making all the calls and adjustments up front, and taking ownership of that quickly, bodes really well for his transition with us. And he did an outstanding job at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. He's a stud when you guys get a chance to interview him, how intelligent he is, how well-spoken, how mature, all those things really jumped out.
Yeah, I know I personally was really excited with Olu the other day. He was not saying too much early when we started talking about scheme stuff, and you can tell the guy is a football lifer because he started talking a bunch about the different types of schemes, what he learned in the pro-style offense. And speaking of Olu, we're talking about a guy that won the Remington Award, won the Outland Award as well. Big name center coming from Michigan. And then you've got Jarek Reed, your next selection, who is on the other end of the spectrum. Somehow he was a first-team All-State guy in Mississippi, and he has no scholarship offers for D1 or D2. And then after JUCO for a year, New Mexico is the only team that's interested in bringing him in. Very little fanfare, despite being a 4-year starter at New Mexico and putting up really good numbers at his pro day. That's what puts him on the mark. How does a guy like that slip through the cracks? And I guess based off what John Schneider said recently, how grateful were you guys that you were able to get him late in the draft with the fact that he became more of a known commodity here the last couple months?
Yeah, I don't know how much buzz Jarek had, but I mean, we were on him for a long time. You got to credit Ryan Florence. I mean, so you guys know enough about our process where we're starting right now for the 24 draft, right? So, Ryan came to us this summer and was like, I got this player that I really like. And then it's about, we got to know him and got to feel him. And you guys will when you get to interview and spend some time with him and how special he is and the chip on his shoulder and how intelligent. Everybody has a different path. Some guys, are overlooked. Maybe it was his size. Maybe it was, being from, where he was in Mississippi. I don't know. I don't know why the Mississippi State coaches and the Ole Miss coaches didn't offer him. I don't know the reason for that, but I know what he did in New Mexico was he made the most of that opportunity, and he grew and developed into a player. And then on our end, it's when you have a player like that as an area scout, and to not talk about him with your peers on the road, and then to keep it in house, and then to keep it close to the vest is a credit to everybody in the organization in our process. And then to watch Ryan call him on draft day was a pretty special moment. I thought, John deserves a lot of credit giving him that opportunity. But that speaks to the group. We've been together a long time, and we're really excited about the player.
It seems like John and Pete were really smitten about that draft pick. It seems like every time that his name gets mentioned in a press conference, I mean, I don't know that I have seen John smile as wide as he did after the draft with this kid. And maybe it's just the backstory, maybe it's the versatility, but
I think it's all of the above. He's a non-combine guy that we brought in on a 30 visit, which is we're playing with fire there because people track 30 visits. Other teams, I'm talking about the league, but he ended up visiting one other place, and so we kind of monitored their draft and where they were picking, and fortunately we had enough picks on day 3 to make it happen. But he's a really unique player from a coverage standpoint. He's played free, he's played strong, he's played their right and left wolf position. He's been the Lobo in their defense, so he's been exposed to a lot of different things. He's a fast player. He's physical. He throws his body around. He's got ball skills. I mean, he's going to be dynamite on special teams for us. And just adding him to the mix of our secondary with the type of competitor and the person, the football intelligence, we were really excited. And that's why you see the response that Coach and John have about him. And then when you guys are around him, you'll feel he's got charisma. He's a legit dude. He's very confident, in his ability.
He really is. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be able to listen to a lot of, rookie mini camp press conferences, Matt. And there's been so many players over the years that had so much more buzz behind them. And I was excited to listen to their first impressions of Seattle and the Seahawks. But there's nobody that I've ever listened to that just kind of wowed me more than Jarek Reed did. I mean, as you said, the charisma about him, the confidence of him. I mean, he's cracking jokes about John Schneider as if they've known each other for years and years and years. So I think it kind of just speaks to who he is and why there's a lot of people, a growing number of people who really believe that he's going to be successful. And it's kind of the perfect opposite with Kenny McIntosh, the Seattle's last selection of the 2023 class. And the guy that I was really, really high on, Corbin was really, really high on as well. I had him as among the top 10 running backs in this class, and Corbin was even higher on him than I was. Obviously, you guys are high on him as well. You make the selection of Zach Charbonnet in the second round. I think there's some outside of Seattle who would say Seahawks cannot afford the luxury, quote unquote, luxury of selecting another running back. But the argument I think that you're going to make here is this is just too good of a football player. At least that's what John Schneider said when he called Kenny McIntosh. And I have to agree. How do you think that McIntosh has the skill set and the mentality to be able to kind of seamlessly, join Seattle's backfield?
I do. So you guys, from a context standpoint, we had 3 running backs on the roster, including Charbonnet at the point. So, obviously from a roster makeup standpoint, there's was a gaping hole there. And you're sitting there looking at your board late in the draft, and you're looking for guys that, you can capture the most talent, and he stood out. I mean, you guys have talked about it. And yes, I think he's got a unique skill set that's a little different from both Ken and Zach. You know, he's really good on third down. He's really good in the passing game. He's good in pass pro. He can play on special teams. He's got return in his background. He's a physical guy. He's really smart. And I think he's a guy that hit 21.4 miles per hour on tape in the fall and then did not work out well. And so for whatever reason, his spring from a combine testing standpoint didn't go well. And I think that's what hit him. And I think he said the same thing, but there's a belief and there's a chip on his shoulder. And I think he's going to come in and contribute right away. He's going to find a way to impact our team. And we were excited to get him where we did.
Does his background at Georgia, playing with all those different future NFL backs, is that something that plays into your mind when you're drafting a guy like this late in the draft too, thinking he is used to this, he understands how to compete against top-level guys? Now he's got Ken Walker III and Charbonneau in front of him. Is that something that plays into that evaluation for you guys too?
Yeah, not at that point. The evaluation's done prior, to day 3 of the draft. We're pretty solid on the player, and then we're talking about how is that player going to transition and be successful in our program, and having a roster spot and being thin from a depth standpoint at the position, from a number standpoint, played into it. But he's a talented player. He should have gone earlier. I mean, I think what John said was apt.
The last question for me, at least, would just be: we just finished up with the rookie mini camp. Was there any players that, whether it be the draft class or any of the undrafted free agents, that stood out to you?
Yeah, I'm not gonna touch that because somebody will listen to this and see who's doing well. But we're excited about the group of players, and then obviously you guys know how we pride ourselves on our undrafted classes and having a couple guys every year make the team. I mean, that's something our credit to the area guys and our process for getting those guys in here. But no, we're not going to tip our hand on that one right now, Rob. I appreciate the question, though.
Hey, Matt, we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule with that brand new title. We know that you've got the draft to get ready for next season. You've got the free agents to look at, players on other teams for training camp next year. So we're going to let you get back to work and do that new title that you got with the Seahawks. But we appreciate you taking the time to join us, and it's been a blast.
Yeah, still trying to figure out what that means, but we're just trying to do whatever we can to get better as a group, and hopefully we can put a good team out for you guys.
As always, you can follow me on Twitter, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Subscribe and follow Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. You don't want to miss tomorrow's episode. We got another very special guest, Jim Nagy, director of the Senior Bowl, former Seahawks scout. He'll be joining us to break down Seattle's 4 selections that participated in the Senior Bowl and maybe take a look back at how last year's class of Senior Bowl players performed for the Seahawks during the 2022 season. It's going to be an awesome episode. Make sure that you're tuning in. Thanks for listening. Go Hawks.